Hello, and welcome back to It's a Very Exciting Time, a podcast by a UFO nerd and its tolerant friend. My name is Scott, and I've been fascinated by the phenomenon my whole life.
And my name is Chuck. I'm an aerospace nerd and a tolerant friend.
We started this podcast because since 2017, there have been shocking revelations, from news of secret Pentagon programs to confirmed Navy videos of astonishing craft. In a nutshell, now that the government has admitted that UFOs are real,
Or at least that the videos were authentic.
it raises a natural question. If UFOs are real, what else? Suddenly, some of these other parts of the phenomenon that seemed unlikely are pulled into the realm of the possible.
Right? They may still be unlikely. But there's so many explanations for these stories. Even if the truth is more mundane than you're hoping, if any of it turns out to be true,
Woo! It's a very exciting time. So, Chuck, last time we talked about how this is a very exciting time because the US government has admitted that UFOs are real. Now, as we talked about, that doesn't mean that they're little green men. That doesn't
did
necessarily
they?
mean anything. But yeah,
Or did they
100%.
admit that those
UFOs.
recordings were legitimate?
No, they admitted that UFOs are real and they don't know what they are, and that they're not just
Okay,
like weather balloons. Um,
okay.
so the whole thing we were talking about was the old party line used to be there's nothing up there. You're all crazy. It's Venus, it's swamp gas, it's weather balloons.
Sure.
This is a market shift. UFOs are real. They were not coming out and saying we have made contact with Zeta Reticuli. They are not saying we can't defend ourselves. They're not
Right.
saying it's aliens. They're not even ruling out the possibility that it's Russians. But there are anomalous flying objects who have flight characteristics we can't explain. That's a big deal.
Sure.
Um, so, like we said last time, very exciting time. The thing I want to talk about this week is one of my favorite stories about this.
Okay.
All of this that has happened since 2017
I'm
can be
stealing myself.
traced. You should be. This is buck wild. All of this can be traced directly to the lead singer of Blink 182, Tom DeLonge.
Okay. Carry on. Tell me more.
Okay. Now, I know right now in your head you're thinking, Scott's being hyperbolic, right? He's going to tell me this story, and it's going to like
Right.
a chain of events that Tom DeLonge is
Yeah,
arguably
exactly.
involved in.
Totally
No,
Kevin
man.
Bacon. Like,
No, this is legit. This all happened because of Tom DeLonge,
okay. All right. I mean, I guess you got to do something when you're not recording music, right?
right? Now, Chuck, you and I are about the same age, right? I'm
Yeah.
44, you're
Are you
42?
44? I'm 40. There's no way
Am I
you're
44?
44. Do your math.
I'm pretty sure I'm 44. I'm,
You were
I'm now
born in
looking at the
78?
website where I track websites. I was born in 78.
All right.
Yeah,
All
I'm
right. Shit.
44 years and 4 months old.
Wow.
I
Okay.
had to look that up. That's how old I am. I'm old enough that I have to look it up. Okay,
Yeah.
but the
Okay.
point is,
Carry on.
we were both in high school in the late 90s.
Hmm.
Blink 182 was a big band in the
Yeah.
90s. Arguably one of the biggest bands in the world. They were touring everywhere. They had number one hits nonstop. They were the face of the kind of pop punk movement and music, like big deal band. Um, Having dug into this story a little bit, what I can tell you, and I know this is a topic that is near and dear to your heart, Tom DeLonge is severely ADHD.
Oh, all right. Great. My
And
people.
every story you hear about Tom DeLonge, it just like, oh, buddy,
Mm.
right? Like
Yep. Checks
in
out.
high school, he was brilliant, but he also did not care about school at all. He knew exactly the amount of work he had to do to get
Yeah.
a C and would not do a
Hmm.
minute more work. The
That's
only
how we
things he
do.
cared about were skateboarding and playing guitars.
Yeah.
Uh,
So, speaking of squirrels, remind me after we record this, I have to tell you a
Speaking of
story.
squirrels, were we?
I mean, that's the thing with ADHD, right? Like,
Oh, squirrel. Okay,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. Squirrel. So, remind me, I have to tell you a funny squirrel story afterwards. But anyways, carry on
Okay.
about this
Is that
person
part
who
of the
has ADD.
podcast?
No, 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 this is unrelated.
Okay. we'll leave this in the post credits for the dedicated
We have
fans.
a rich life outside of the podcast, you know?
Okay, so Tom DeLonge, severely ADHD, only cares about skateboarding and music. He meets the guys he's going to form Blink 182 with in high school. They start touring. There are all sorts of funny stories from this time. Like early on, when Tom was booking gigs for the band, he would do things like call up other high schools and convince them that Blink 182 was a motivational act.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I know how this goes.
Right?
I did
So
shit
he's
like
a
that too.
hustler. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. He's out here to make this band work.
Yeah.
And it works, right? Blink 182 blows up. They are touring nonstop. Uh, Being a fellow old, you will remember the days before smartphones.
The dark times, as we called them, as
They
like
were the
literally
dark times,
we didn't have
right? So
flashlights. Like, how did
imagine,
you get it? You know?
yeah. So imagine you are a severely ADHD young man at the peak of his game, spending a
Yeah.
lot of time on buses and airplanes.
Yeah.
This is pre-smartphones. You're not able to just
Yeah.
like dork around on Twitter. What does Tom DeLonge do? He reads literally every UFO book published.
Yeah.
Like he
Checks
just
out.
works his way through the book. And there are jokes from the time of interviews with his bandmates talking about Tom, like info dumping about
Mm,
UFOs on them. There's even a
yep.
song on their album Enema of the State called Aliens Exist, right? So what I'm trying
Okay.
to establish is Tom DeLonge has the kind of personality who's going to deep dive on a topic he cares about.
Sure.
He
Yeah.
has been interested in UFOs for a while, uh, and he's rich and spending a lot of time somewhat bored.
Yeah. Rich
Blink
and bored.
182,
That's
right?
really the winning ingredients, isn't it?
Yeah. So Blink 182 has a rather tumultuous history in the
Yeah.
mid 2000s. They've broken up multiple times. Notably in 2004, they broke up, and
Hmm.
Tom spent some time with the John Kerry presidential campaign.
Yeah.
Uh, so he kind of
Cool.
got involved in politics and kind of got this idea that, like, oh, maybe I can be involved in helping to make the world a better place.
Oh,
This is
well,
an
that's
idea that we
nice.
kind of see come up again and again and again.
Yeah. Yeah.
In 2015, 2014, Blink breaks up again in January. Uh, and this story is kind of like hot drama, right? Like
Wait,
the
2014 they broke up?
well, they broke up multiple times. So in 2004 they broke up. They got together again after Travis Barker almost died. It's a whole thing.
Okay. All right.
Um,
All right.
so they
Not
broke up
important.
again in 2014. This is where we're getting close to our timeline, right? 2017
Yeah.
is
Right.
when that New York Times article broke. So
Hmm.
we're working up towards that. So early 2014, he has his manager send an email to the rest of the band saying Tom is dropping out for now to focus on non-musical interests. Uh,
Okay.
and they ended up replacing him. Like it was a big deal.
Okay.
So Tom DeLonge is an independent act. He, around this time, starts a new band called Angels and Airwaves, which he
Mm,
catches some guff for describing as how it's going to be like a whole new youth movement and like unite the culture, and it's going to be a whole multimedia thing. And this is the
huh.
thing we see with Tom again and again. It's this idea of it's not just one thing, right? The youth don't just want music. They want a clothing line and a TV
Yeah.
show and a documentary and a movie and like you
Yeah.
got to hit them everywhere. Um,
So they have, he has to make like, it has to be multi-sensory, like this podcast, right?
mhm. Just like this sensual podcast.
Exactly.
That's right.
All right,
Uh,
carry on.
so the other thing that happens in 2014, and I'm going to warn you up front. I'm about to start telling stories about Tom. I'm going to be telling them in a roughly chronological order, but all of this
Okay.
stuff has come out in the most chaotic way possible, right? Tom
Sure. Yeah.
gives these
How it goes.
indiscriminate interviews where he drops factoids and yeah.
Okay.
So sometime in late 2014, he participates in something known as a CE5 thing.
Okay.
CE5 stands for Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind.
Wait,
The
what's
close encounter skill.
okay? But
What's wrong?
like, I thought it was the fourth kind. There's, or did I just get that
Yeah, you're
wrong?
onto something.
Okay,
No, you're
all
not
right.
wrong.
Are there
So,
actually
the,
like five different categories, or how many
well, there were
categories are
four.
there?
This is the fifth. So,
Okay, so he
this guy
invented a
made
new
this
one.
scale back in the 70s to describe different types of encounters. So this kind of comes back to the
Okay,
blue book stuff. How do you
okay,
how do
all
you
right,
differentiate between different types of encounters? I don't remember exactly what they are, but it's like CE1 is like you saw a light in the sky, CE2 is like it landed. Close encounters of the third kind famously is you saw an alien being. And I think
okay.
fourth is like you went on board the ship or something.
Hmm.
Uh, but CE5 is one that was added recently. It's kind of controversial, but it boils down to human initiated contact. And it ties into this big belief that consciousness is part of it. And if you have a group who is meditating and putting forward intention,
Oh,
you can initiate contact with a UFO.
okay,
It's
got it.
controversial, even within
Yeah,
the
no
UFO
way.
community. And
So you
not
can't just
least
grab a Ouija
because,
board and
well,
do this.
there's a lot of people who do believe in it, and I'm not sure I'm ready to dismiss it entirely. But part of the reason it's
Okay,
controversial is the biggest cheerleader of CE5 is this guy named Stephen Greer, who I don't really want to get into. He's a whole topic,
okay,
but notably, Stephen Greer was caught falsifying CE5 encounters. He
sure,
had hired a
yeah.
plane to fly off the coast and drop flares during a CE5 event. He
Uh-huh.
charges money for CE5 events. It's a
Okay,
whole thing.
got it.
But relevant for our story, Tom participates in a CE5 event in late 2014 that kind of shakes him to his core. The details are unimportant, but he comes away convinced this is real. He's already
Okay,
super into UFOs.
yeah, right.
He's already a believer. He is extremely knowledgeable, and now he has had a personal encounter.
Now he's motivated.
Right. Now
I
we
mean,
talked
more
about
than
Tom.
before. Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about Tom has this kind of um, this angle of how to pitch things to the youth, how to disseminate
Mm,
information. And in the last podcast, we talked about my frustration with like every time you watch the news or a UFO story comes up, it's always like, oh, the X-Files theme song, and the anchors are
yeah, yeah.
giggling and talking about little green men. Like nobody takes it seriously. Imagine you're Tom DeLonge. You are rich. You have had a personal encounter. You are deeply involved in this, and you feel the same frustration that no one
Mm,
is properly addressing this material in a way that people would understand.
sure. So
So
what do you do?
Tom, unlike me, just kind of feeling frustrated about it, decides to do something about it.
Okay.
Now, here's the thing. Around this time, Tom starts appearing in interview segments, most famously on Joe Rogan's podcast, and then later on Coast to Coast AM, which is
Okay.
a whole other ball of wax. And
Yeah,
I'm sure
right.
even you
Yeah.
have heard of Coast to Coast AM. It tends to get kind of lumped under, tabloid kind of stuff. But
Right.
point is, in these interviews, Tom starts talking about the things he is doing, the things he believes, and he's being real cagey about it. He's like, oh,
Mm,
like I flew to a particular city and met a particular individual who I'm not at liberty to discuss, and they told me.
uh-huh.
And he starts telling the story about how he is in contact with high level government officials who are
Sure.
telling him things.
Okay.
And the story he tells basically boils down to in the wake of that CE5 experience, he decides to do something about this. And he starts like reaching out to everyone he can think of. Like he's looking up information for
Yeah.
generals and cold
Starting that
emails.
hustle again.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And again, this is where that ADHD comes in. He doesn't just give up because it's not
No.
working. He just like
Yeah.
doggedly sticks to it.
Yeah.
Except, unlike anybody else, he's Tom DeLonge.
Yeah.
Lockheed
He's
Martin Skunk Works
yeah.
is hosting an open event inviting like family members of people who work at Skunk Works to come into the building and learn a little bit about it, which is a weird
Okay.
thing that they had never done
Yeah.
before.
That's super weird.
Someone
Like,
reached out to Tom DeLonge and asked him to attend the event and introduce the like big executive at Lockheed Martin. This is a part of the story that is real wild, but it has been verified.
that's crazy.
Anyway,
Okay, and I
point is,
believe it.
Tom DeLonge goes, okay,
Hell
I'll do
yeah.
it, but I need 5 minutes alone with the guy.
Okay. Yeah, that's the hustle we were waiting for.
Right?
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So he shows up, he gets his 5 minutes alone with the guy, and he comes in and he studiously avoids the words UFOs,
Uh-huh.
but he comes to the guy and makes it very clear. He's like, look, you need help. Like, you need help reaching the youth, convincing them that you guys aren't the bad guys. This is something I excel at. This is something I want to do. I want to help you. Um, he told a story about around the John Kerry time. He watched a movie about the Cuban Missile Crisis, and he came out of it like interested in the Cuban Missile Crisis, right?
Okay.
Again, ADHD, right?
Yeah,
He,
right. Yeah.
he
That's
wasn't
what we do.
interested until it came to him in a format that he
Yeah,
was
that made sense. And
capable of consuming. So
yeah.
his view on that is more history should be taught this way. If like the story of our politics and our military encounters were taught to me this way, I would be interested. I would
Mm.
care. So he's
So
coming
if
to this
they
guy at Lockheed Martin
like
saying,
hang on. Which
yeah,
which way? Like through video or um
I mean, take it however you want. In Tom's case, this particular dramatization of the events
okay.
worked to get him hooked. Um,
Got it. All right. All
but
right, I'm
I
with
think
you
what
now.
Tom would say is you need kind of a multimedia approach, right? It
Yeah, yeah.
can't be one thing.
Multi-sensory. Okay, got it.
Long story short, the meeting with this guy goes well enough that he gets
Okay.
a second meeting.
Okay.
So Tom describes this meeting as taking place in a highly secured government facility. He has to go through 4 layers
Sure.
of security, including like hallways with white noise playing so you can't overhear conversations. He's in a
Sure.
secure bunker with this guy, one of the aerospace executives from Lockheed, um, and they talk to him, and he again pitches this idea. But at this point, the one of the other guys from Lockheed is like, "Wait a minute, you're that rock star who's been in the news lately for talking about UFOs and aliens and everything. Like, we
Right.
can't be associated with this. There's not a shred of evidence that that
Yeah,
stuff
yeah.
exists." Tom, again, somehow this superhuman ability is like, okay, hey man, I need 5 minutes alone with you. And like gets the other guys dismissed from the room and again sits down and pins the guy down and is like, look, man, you need help with this. Like
Hmm.
the US government had a program to influence the way people think. And this is true. This has come out in
Yeah.
Freedom
Yeah,
of
yeah.
Information Acts. You can ascribe more or less degrees of maliciousness to it, but basically government personnel were embedded in every major news and broadcast facility, and for a long time, stuff kind of got run through them.
Yeah,
Tom's like,
yeah.
look, you guys have this playbook from the 50s, but it's backfiring on you because nobody trusts you now. You
Yeah.
can't keep going with this
Uh,
playbook. All the kids today, they have the internet, they have smartphones, they're on Twitter, they're listening to podcasts. Like you have to come at them from different angles. I can help you with this. And basically he
yeah.
pitches not, I'm here to help you with UFO disclosure. He pitches them with, I can make working with the industrial military complex cool again, which is a
Oh, wow. Okay.
super weird thing to say. And depending on what
Yeah.
you think about Tom DeLonge, this is either a completely earnest belief because Tom DeLonge is a tool of the military industrial complex,
Could
or
be.
an incredibly savvy maneuver to
Good
manipulate these
hustle.
people into disclosing to him. Regardless, he says it and it works.
Yeah, right.
So Tom is giving these interviews. And he's talking about how all this has happened. And he talks about how, this guy from Lockheed Martin, and by the way, he doesn't say it's Lockheed Martin. We found out later.
Okay. All
This
right.
guy connected him to the general, and he connected him to this guy, and
Sure.
he connected him to this guy. And Tom's assembling this crew of advisors. Tom has this quote about how, like, I knew I needed like a Camelot. I needed like a round table of
Camelot.
advisors.
Is that a
Because
unit?
if I just go out and start talking, like, who am I? Like, I've just read all the books. Like, I don't have insider
Right.
information. I need the people who actually have the insider information. So he
Sure.
starts acquiring this crew of advisors, people who actually know things. And he's coming out on Joe Rogan and he's saying these insane things.
Yeah.
Now, I
Wait,
need to be clear.
so hold up.
Yeah, yeah.
Is this, I read in my 15 minutes of research,
Uh-huh.
is this the company he built, is it To the Stars or, um,
Yeah, we're getting there. Yeah.
okay, all right. So it's the precursor to that. I'm trying to just fill
Yeah,
in my
so
history.
To the Stars went public in 2017. He was setting it up
Okay,
before then. Well,
okay,
okay,
got it.
it's even more complicated than that. To the Stars existed since 2014, but it was just the publishing wing for his band Angels and Airwaves and some comic books.
Uh,
To
okay,
the Stars Academy launched in 2017. That's the part you're thinking of. But
okay, got it.
anyway, so Tom is on Joe Rogan and George Knapp, Coast to Coast, talking about all these crazy things. He's talking about how, not only are UFOs real, but aliens are real. They have been with us since like primitive days. They have shaped our species. All human religions are based on interactions with aliens. Um,
Okay.
the government has back engineered programs. There was a UFO crash in Roswell in 47, but there was also a UFO crash in Russia and one in China, depending
Hmm,
on how you look at it.
that's
This is
cool.
because the aliens are trying to get us to fight. Like Tom is saying
Okay,
some bonkers things.
yeah,
I need to be really, really clear here. Everyone thinks Tom DeLonge is crazy. If
okay,
you go back and look at the
cool.
news
So not
stories
alone
pre
here.
2017, everybody is like, yeah, Tom DeLonge is off his rocker. Like, oh, you're never going
Okay,
to believe what the Blink 182 guy is saying.
yeah, right,
And here's where the story should have died.
right. Okay,
Behind the scenes, however, Tom is working with a bunch of people, including, notably, John Podesta. John Podesta was embedded in the Obama White House. He was a big name there. Uh, was he chief of staff? Who was he?
John
John
Podesta. I'm
Podesta.
not sure I've ever heard that name. It feels, I don't know. Maybe I don't.
He was a senior advisor to Biden. Yeah, he was
Okay.
chief of staff for Clinton.
Wow.
So
Hmm,
he leaves the Obama White House to work on Hillary Clinton's campaign. And
okay.
when he left the Obama White House, he famously tweeted that his biggest regret in 2014 was that he still didn't get the UFO files disclosed.
Okay.
Right? So
Interesting.
John Podesta is a believer.
Yeah.
Behind the scenes, Tom DeLonge and John Podesta are working together. John Podesta is
Okay.
helping connect him to people. So Tom DeLonge is saying, like, I'm talking to generals, I'm talking to high ranking government officials, I'm talking to someone who has the ear of the president, all of this stuff. And
Hmm.
everybody's like, okay, whatever, Tom. Do you remember in 2016 when Trump stood up and said, like, hey, Russia, you should hack the Democrats?
No, but I'm unsurprised by that.
Okay. It was kind of a big deal to have a presidential candidate openly calling for
Yeah.
another nation to illegally hack us. But what's wilder is they did.
I
So
mean,
there
why
was
not?
a WikiLeaks drop in 2016 of a bunch of emails from the DNC. Now, this turned out to be kind of a political nothing, weirdly enough, because
Hmm.
it turns out the DNC just aren't very interesting.
I mean, this is unsurprising to me, actually. Like,
Well, right, like the
these people are
Republicans were
just
hoping there was going to be a smoking gun, like, regarding Hunter Biden's laptop, like burn it in a fire, like cover it up
right.
so the Republicans can't find out the truth, like
It
there's
turns
nothing
out these
like that.
people are just like nice and trying to do the best they can. Like, damn it.
Right, yeah, exactly. So
Okay, carry
what
on.
was interesting though is in the WikiLeaks, we got a bunch of John Podesta's emails.
Hmm.
And guess what? Everything Tom DeLonge was saying about the people he was meeting, and I want to be clear, I don't know about any of Tom's other claims, but specifically
Yeah,
about like I am in contact with these high-powered people, I am
sure.
receiving briefings. That was all true. It's confirmed in Podesta's emails, which again weren't
Okay.
like something that anybody expected to leak. The story, as far as we can tell, is Podesta and Tom DeLonge were working to set up a soft disclosure movement that
Hmm.
Hillary Clinton was going to be spearheading. Hillary Clinton was going to be the disclosure president.
Hmm. Okay.
But then she lost.
Right. Yeah.
And no one was really prepared for that. So the whole thing fell apart.
Got it.
So the
Okay.
the weird story about Tom DeLonge is if Trump hadn't won and if Russia hadn't hacked the DNC servers, we never would have had this information come out in public because while Tom was talking about it, he was not bringing these people forward. He
Hmm.
was just saying like, "Oh, you'll never believe what I've been hearing." What he
Hmm.
was actually doing was all behind the scenes. It was all setting things up, getting, official people to help work with his kind of media initiatives to seed information out to the public. Tom was pitching this soft disclosure idea of ease the public into this idea
Sure.
through media projects. That whole thing got torpedoed when Clinton lost the White House. So a lot of the people he
But
was working with weren't
it kind of happened anyways, though, right? Or
kinda. Yeah.
was New York
So they
Times
had to
not the
pivot.
soft entry that they were hoping
Yeah.
for?
So the soft disclosure they were hoping for was backdoor coordination with the government and
Hmm.
easing the public into it. But then they
Okay.
lost the government.
Right.
So
Yeah.
they don't have it anymore.
Yeah.
So Tom is forced to pivot. And there are interviews where the people who work at TTSA have talked about they're the B team. Like there was a different iteration of To the Stars that would have happened if Hillary had taken command. And that didn't happen. So they ended up pivoting.
Hmm.
So in 2017, out of apparently nowhere, Tom DeLonge holds a press conference announcing the formation of To the Stars Academy. And again, remember, everybody thought he's crazy. But suddenly, up there on stage with him are these big name hardcore people. So
Hmm.
specifically, there are four people in To the Stars that are worth talking about.
Okay.
The first one is this guy named Steve Justice. Steve Justice was like a big name aerospace designer from Lockheed Martin Skunk Works.
Such a good name.
Yeah, great name. But also aerospace engineer and
Okay.
working
Got it.
for
That's what I
the
was supposed to
black.
get out of it.
Well, but more importantly, working for if there was any company anywhere that knew about top secret US
Hmm.
spy planes that would be
Sure.
mistaken for UFOs, this would be the guy, right? Like
Probably.
Skunk Works
Okay.
is the division that would have made that. They are like the favored military contractor for this kind of stuff.
Okay.
And Skunk Works, especially, like Lockheed Martin as a big company, but Skunk Works especially is where all those big name planes were developed.
Is
So
Skunkworks actually a company, or is that just the term for the
it's
work?
a part of Lockheed Martin. Yeah, they're
Okay.
they're
Is
the
that
like
where
secret development department.
the phrase comes from?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Well,
Cool.
I
Like,
take that back. I don't know.
okay.
Maybe they
Okay.
named it that because that was already a phrase, but that's the association I've always heard it from. So
Okay.
that's one
Cool.
guy, right? Steve
Yeah.
Justice, hardcore aerospace engineer. Uh, Next dude is Hal Puthoff. Hal Puthoff is a guy I had never heard of, but was well known in certain circles. Hal
Uh-huh.
Puthoff is from the CIA. He's a senior intelligence operator. All of that stuff, that you would kind of expect to see from a high-ranking CIA guy. Also, ran
Also,
Project Stargate, the
yeah.
CIA's remote viewing program, for 20 years.
Yeah.
We've briefly touched on this. Whether or not you believe in remote viewing, the CIA believed in it enough to found a major department for 20 years that was actually giving intel. And Hal Puthoff was the head of the department.
But it was closed because the CIA found that it hadn't actually achieved anything over the 20 years. And and the results
There
were
are
vague
different
and
stories about
unhelpful.
that. So
Okay.
the
All
story
right.
that I have heard is the problem with remote viewing wasn't that it didn't work. The problem is that it's almost impossible to verify. Like the whole
Yeah.
point
All
of
right.
remote viewing is it's stuff that your spy satellites couldn't find. If your spy satellites could find, you would have been using that intel to begin with.
Sure.
So
Right.
it's very hard to verify. Now, they were able to later verify a lot of it. And the other thing that's important to understand is when they talk about these programs, they're not saying it works, meaning 100% of the time we get actionable intel. They mean greater than statistically predicted.
Mm.
So if you were to put a dude in a room and say, what are the Russians working on in this base? There's kind of a random success criteria that you would expect from
Yeah.
someone just kind of speculating. They were getting
Yeah.
greater than random hits. I don't know what degree greater is. Was it
Yeah.
51%? Was it 80%? And there's
Okay.
also supposed to be different people are different, uh, more or less strong in this ability.
Mm.
There are a few people who are very good. Is that enough to maintain a program? Well, it was enough for the CIA to pay for it for 20 years, right? It wasn't a 2 year program. It wasn't a five
Yeah.
year program. Like 20 years, they spent a lot of money on it. So anyway,
Hmm.
Hal Puthoff,
Yeah.
kind of legendary. Uh, the next guy is Christopher Mellon. Christopher Mellon was we were just talking about this title and now I've forgotten it.
Yeah.
Is the Deputy
Deputy
Assistant
assistant.
Secretary of Defense.
Yeah.
Extremely
Yeah.
high placed government side involved in Defense Department
We
operations.
think with a title like that, who knows? But carry on.
Well, so before we started recording, Chuck and I were joking about the title Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, and like, is this kind of like Dwight Schrute? Like, no, you're the assistant to the Secretary of Defense. Like,
Yeah.
I
Right.
don't know. There have been a lot of interviews with him talking about
Yeah.
what he's done. He genuinely does seem to be a highly placed
Seems
guy.
like a smart cookie. And okay. All right. Carry
Yeah.
on.
So, but the main point is Christopher Mellon's not like a nobody. Christopher Mellon has been a
Okay.
public servant for, 40 some odd years. He's been highly placed in multiple administrations. This is not a guy who randomly quits government to work at a UFO startup. Right?
Sure.
Hal Puthoff, that's the guy to quit government
Totally.
and work at a
Yeah.
UFO startup. Steve Justice, maybe. Chris Mellon, nah, man, that ain't
Okay.
it. He's
Interesting.
there for a
So,
reason.
oh, okay.
And the fourth
This
person who was
will,
up on stage with
okay.
him, sorry, go ahead.
This reminds me of Karl Marx had a quote about how to start a revolution. He said, you
Yeah,
need a crazy ideas person, uh, someone who's just out there. You need
so that'd be
a,
Tom.
yeah, you need a business person to sell it
Hmm.
and make it seem like acceptable. Sounds like that's
Hmm.
melon. And then
Yeah,
you
that'd
need
definitely be Mellon.
an everyman to help the community and the public understand and get on board. Uh,
Oh, buddy, you couldn't have set me up better. So that brings
yeah.
us to the fourth person on stage,
Okay.
Mr. Lou Elizondo. So
Ah.
we touched on Mr. Elizondo a bit in the previous one, but the main reason you will have heard of Lou Elizondo is he was the primary source for the 2017 New York Times article that disclosed the secret government UAP office. He was the director of that office. Now, Lou Elizondo he's not an everyman by any stretch of the imagination,
Hmm.
but he's not a suit and tie kind of guy, right? Chris Mellon is a politician through and through. Um,
Yeah.
Hal Puthoff and Steve Justice are scientists. Lou Elizondo is a military guy, right? He shows up. He'll wear a suit when he needs to, but he's clearly much more at home in like a t-shirt. He's got this like funny goatee, like he's covered in
Hmm.
tattoos. This is a dude who has been doing like actual on the ground military work for years. He was a
Okay.
counterintelligence guy. He was involved in terrorist stuff. Like he wasn't like a nobody, but he's definitely closer to your everyman figure. Lou Elizondo became the public face of UFO stuff for
Yeah.
several years. He's only really just now stepping back. Um, so Tom DeLonge gets up on stage with all of these guys. Uh,
Yeah.
and the big show stealer at the time was Lou Elizondo. He's like, oh, by the way, also joining our team is Lou Elizondo, the former head of the government UFO task force, who you may have
Yeah.
read about in the New York Times article that came out like yesterday.
This sounds
You
like
know,
a Apple announcement, like, oh, one more thing. Oh, it's the Apple Watch. Oh
yeah,
my God.
basically,
Yeah.
right? And remember, Lou quit the government out of frustration.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like he's a government man, he's a military man
Mhm.
through and through, but he felt that he couldn't get his superiors to take the topic seriously. He's coming down with
Yeah.
reports
Right.
like, look, these things are there, they are bugging our pilots, they are doing things we can't explain. This is not just debris falling out of the sky. And he couldn't like he's got
Yeah.
intervening chains of command between him and the admirals, and no one would take it higher. So he finally quit out of frustration. He's like, all right, I'll do it from the public.
Yeah.
So they joined to the stars. Now remember I talked about Tom having this idea of like multidisciplinary, we're going to go to the youth, we're going to do
Yeah. Yeah.
everything. Okay, the very first thing To the Stars does is Chris Mellon shops around a story and ends up working with the New York Times and Politico to announce To the Stars
Okay.
and to talk about the UFO office and to leak those three videos. So we talked about those before, and I
Yeah. Yeah.
kind of brushed this aside as like, oh yeah, they came out in the New York Times article. Well, the source was To the Stars, and we
Oh,
have
I
found
didn't
out
know.
since the source
Okay.
was Chris Mellon directly.
Okay.
So
Interesting.
so again, Tom DeLonge's company is like heavily involved in getting the news out to the public. The next thing they did, they got a contract with the History Channel to produce a TV show documentary called
Yeah.
oh God, what was it called? Unidentified. Um,
Okay.
and it was through that show that we learned most about what Lou
Hmm.
believes about UFOs. And I talked
Okay.
to you briefly about how like Lou's a really funny guy because he
Yeah.
dances right up to the edge of his security. And he
Yeah.
was very
Right.
clear on the show. He's like, look, me and Chris and Steve and Hal, like we were insiders. We have access to information,
Yeah. Okay.
and we don't necessarily all have access to the same information, and we
Huh.
can't even talk
Interesting.
to each other about it.
Yeah. Right.
But we all know things.
Yeah.
There's a reason we're all here, and so he had to be really careful about like setting up their own investigation as part of To the
Right.
Stars for this
Interesting.
documentary that wasn't just like, oh, I happen to know if you go talk to this guy, he knows something. Like
Yeah.
they had to kind of like pretend like they didn't know what they knew so that they
Hmm.
could officially discover it in a non-classified way, which is
Oh
hilarious.
God.
The dance is
Oh,
really
that's
funny to
such a
watch.
mess. No, I
It
mean,
really is a mess. But the show
that's
is
yeah.
fascinating. It's
Okay.
all interviews with
Recommended?
military witnesses. Oh, highly, highly.
Okay. All right.
Um,
Cool.
and we talked about, nuts and bolts versus woo. That show
Yeah.
is all nuts and bolts. There's
Okay.
no
Cool.
mention of aliens. It's all
Yeah.
like, let's go talk to this highly credible witness who has multiple forms of observational data that showed there was an unidentified object. They talked about the five observables
Hmm.
being how you tell the difference between like a kid's balloon that floated up and got caught on the radar array and something that's pulling G forces that would liquefy a
Right.
human pilot, making 90-degree turns and transmedium travel in ways that we cannot explain and cannot be simply attributed to, oh, this is a next gen Russian fighter. Like,
Right.
no, this is well beyond anything anybody on Earth can produce as far as we can tell. So, anyway, the documentary was fascinating. But yeah, so they put out the documentary. Um, Tom was already publishing books with this imprint, which have continued to come out. He's doing a three-part fiction series and a three-part nonfiction series, all called Secret Machines, spelled with a
Hmm.
K, which is
Of course. Yeah. Secret.
eye-rollingly twee, but whatever. I have read the first book in each series. So the nonfiction series is subtitled, the first book is subtitled Gods, the second book is subtitled Man, and the third book is subtitled War. The third book hasn't
Okay.
come out yet. The first book is basically ancient alien stuff. So remember I
Okay.
talked about Tom was saying like,
Yeah.
They've been here the whole time. These are gods
Right.
with a
Yeah.
little g. They feud among themselves. They've raised us from apes for
Maybe. Okay.
reasons.
Okay.
And they kind of explore the history of the world's religions through the lens of what if all religion is a cargo cult for actual contact with aliens.
Sure.
I will admit, I'm having a hard time with that book. I'm still working through book one.
Yeah.
The fiction book was fascinating, very
Okay.
well produced, really fun to read. And the narrative is basically the Nazis either had a crashed UFO or were developing a UFO,
Okay.
and it didn't work out. And at the end of World War II, Project Paperclip happened. Those Nazis came over and participated in our aerospace industry. And in the book's version of events, they were immediately squirreled away to secretive programs to continue their work on UFOs. And the US government now has these
Sure.
super advanced UFO type fighters. Um, the book follows several main characters. One of whom is a reporter who has accidentally kind of stumbled on news about these Nazi scientists. Another
Okay.
one is a pilot in the Air Force who gets pulled into this program and flies the new drone. But you see it from his perspective. So he doesn't have a need to know on any of this shit. He gets
Hmm.
brought in and shown the plane. They won't
Oh,
answer him
interesting.
where it came from or why it has this weird ability to fly in ways that don't make sense. He
Yeah.
has extreme rules about when and where he can take it and how he can use it. He deviates from
Interesting.
that one time. They're super pissed at him. Um, and then this whole thing happens. Anyway, so there's this narrative that Tom is presenting that
Yeah.
basically aliens are real. They have seeded stuff on the planet, and a lot of the stuff we're seeing is our government's attempting to wrestle with this.
Yeah. Sure.
One of Tom's uh, famous quotes, he talks about meeting this guy, the general, and there's some theories about who the general is, but like he flew to an airport specifically to meet with this guy. Like they picked kind of a
Okay.
random location to meet where they'd be unsurveilled. And he says the first thing the guy says to him is, "It was the Cold War and we had found a life form. And you need to understand we lived under the threat of nuclear annihilation every day, and everything we did was in reaction to this knowledge that we gained."
Okay. Hang on. Is this fiction or nonfiction? Okay. But
So
this was in the
here's
fiction
where,
books, or
well, that's from an interview, but here's
oh,
the thing
okay.
with
All right.
Tom DeLonge, right?
Yeah.
So the question with Tom DeLonge, it gets hard to discuss what's fiction and what's not. Um,
Sure.
there are two little things I'll tell you. One is, um, first of all, just the common sense of it. Tom came out and made a lot of wild claims, stuff that still seems really bonkers. He also made a lot of claims about people he was working with in the government. Those claims have since been verified. So the
Sure.
kind of take is, well, if Tom's telling the truth about that, what about this other stuff?
Yeah.
Now, obviously, it's a little simplistic to say, well, if he told the truth about this, this must also be true.
Yeah. That
There's also
doesn't
the question
pan
of,
out at all.
was he lied to or manipulated?
Sure.
Maybe. So when Tom tells us that a high ranking general told him it was the Cold War and we had recovered a life form, I believe that Tom was told that.
Okay.
I don't know if I believe that it's true or that it
Sure.
happened the way the general spun it. And there is an uncomfortable element here of Tom being a rah rah cheerleader for the military government industrial complex. And these guys eat it up. Like they are
Hmm.
totally invested in this idea of being portrayed as heroes, valiantly staving off.
Right.
Anyway, yeah. So the whole question of whether it's fiction or not is shaky. There's also another story Thomas told, which is after the publication of the first fiction book, which I just kind of outlined for you. Some men from a three-letter agency took him to a hotel for 3 days to
Hmm.
interrogate him. Now, Tom says I was not
I believe
officially
that.
detained, but these are not the kind of guys you say no to. And basically, what happened is these guys had read his book and gotten
Yeah,
freaked out that he was being leaked information by government
absolutely.
insiders.
Yeah,
Um, and it took 3 days for them to realize that no, he wasn't. He had insiders, but they weren't leaking information to him. But what they would do is just like Lou Elizondo, they would drop hints.
yeah.
And Tom, being a smart guy who is relentlessly invested in this topic, was able to
Would
put
connect the
things
dots.
together and connect the dots.
Yeah,
Does that mean everything in his book is true? No, of course not. But it means that enough of it rings true for the government to be concerned. So
yeah.
anyway,
Have
to kind of
hang
circle
on.
back. Sorry, go ahead.
Have you heard the term clean rooming in software?
Vaguely, but explain it.
So we have the same problem. Like, I'll just connect this because maybe it makes a little more sense. We have the same problem where when you're a product company and you develop software, you sometimes have to prove that none of it came from like an open source library or from Stack
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Overflow or something like that. And it sounds like they have the same kind of problem where they have to prove that none of the information that Tom got was from a top secret article,
Right,
and that's rough. Um,
right.
so
Yeah.
I think it's smart that like they're not disclosing info, but I wonder if connecting the dots will ultimately result in the same kind of thing for them.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Now,
interesting.
we've gotten kind of trapped in the weeds here about like
Yeah, right. What
what
are we
Tom
talking about
knows and
today?
what Tom believes and whether he's there. So just to kind of bring us back to the beginning, the thing I wanted to talk about was this idea that everything that has happened since 2017 can be directly placed at Tom DeLonge's feet. And I
Sure,
mean that literally. So we talked about Tom was provably in contact with the people he said he was in contact with. He
sure. Yeah,
was talking to them about a soft disclosure movement. When Hillary did not win the presidency, the plans changed, and instead he
sure.
launched To the Stars Academy, which has these big name people associated with it,
Yeah,
and
makes sense.
directly leads to New York Times article,
Yep.
leaks of videos, which were later authenticated and confirmed to be real, um, leads to this multimedia explosion of documentaries and books and interviews and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Now, early on, To the Stars, we say TTSA, To the Stars Academy, but it's actually
right,
called To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences. And it was
right.
supposed to
Which
be a twofold effort on entertainment, which we've kind of covered,
ah,
but also literally science. There was a reason they brought in Hal Puthoff and Steve Justice, and they were building a
right.
science team. And one of the claims that Tom made was that they had pieces of material from crash debris from flying saucers, and that they were
Right.
going to reverse engineer it themselves.
Why would he pick those two as their scientists? Honestly, like I would want a chemical engineer and mechanical engineers, not
Well, to be clear,
like
there's a whole team working under them. Those are just like the
okay,
the heads of departments. Um,
okay, all right,
Anyway, Tom made a lot of claims about the
yeah,
science they were going to be doing, including this
right,
bombastic claim that they were going to develop anti-gravity. And I want to
oh,
be clear,
okay,
these aren't just Tom shooting his mouth off.
yeah,
They were a company that was selling stock. You can go invest into the stars. They're telling you there will be a return on investment in this, and here are the things we are going to do.
jeez, I'm surprised the SEC
Now,
didn't sue him for that.
well, so in 2020, all of a sudden, Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon leave TTSA.
Uh-huh.
And that year, they filed a statement with the SEC amending their claims and saying, we are no longer doing the science stuff. We are focusing exclusively on the entertainment. Now,
Hmm.
depending on
Hmm.
how bullish you are on Tom DeLonge, you may or may not believe this. This may be oh, okay, yeah, it didn't go anywhere. They were forced to walk it back. What they have said, and I don't know how much credibility you want to give this, is basically the coronavirus torpedoed all of their plans. It suddenly became impossible to coordinate with anybody, and funding dried up. 2020 was a weird time. I
Sure.
buy that their plans were derailed. Um,
Yeah.
what I will say in Tom's favor is they all still seem to be on good terms, right? Because
Okay.
some concern was, oh, Lou and Chris left once it became clear this wasn't a serious place. No, they all still talk all the time. What Lou and Chris have said is they left because they're not entertainers. The company is going to focus on entertainment. That's the right decision for the company, but that's not their thing. They were brought
Sure.
on to focus more on the helping the public with disclosure thing. And they have been working behind the scenes with members of Congress. The word on the
Sure.
street is that basically the Gillibrand Amendment was written by Chris Mellon. Like they
Okay.
are heavily involved in all the
Yeah.
stuff we talked about last time with everything Congress is doing, and most
Great.
notably, the whistleblower protection.
Yeah. Yeah.
Remember, I was
So they
saying
got
Lou
they
Elizondo
got
has
what they
been very
needed.
clear. I want to testify. I want to come
Yeah.
out, but I can't. If only Congress could pass some laws protecting me. Hey, by the way, here's a law that we've
Yeah.
we've
Yeah. Yeah.
written for
I
you
mean,
that
that's
would
how it
that would
works,
give you
right?
exact right.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so I know that's a hyperbolic claim. Tom DeLonge is responsible for the modern UFO disclosure movement, but I want to point
Whatever.
out that's not actually hyperbolic. This
No. No.
literally all happened because Tom DeLonge was talking to these people, put them in the right place. Now, did Tom DeLonge personally leak those videos? Did Tom DeLonge personally write the amendment? No, of course not. But it happened because this
Yeah.
kid from California with ADHD couldn't stop thinking about UFOs.
Yeah. Yeah. Really, any of us can do this. So I totally believe it. And I think that like anyone who had the sufficient funding probably could have been the person to do this, right? Uh, but as someone who has that kind of hustle myself,
Mhm.
I absolutely have observed that most people, no matter how high up they are in the hierarchy, are willing to talk to you if you can get their ear, and you
Yeah,
just work your way. Like I do this all week long at my company,
yeah.
and I have tremendous results to show for it. So I buy it.
Well, and you have to
Um,
be willing to deal with rejection, right?
yeah,
Like,
right,
if Tom is cold emailing generals, how many
right.
responses do you think he got, right? Like,
Not a
a
lot.
lot of people would have gotten frustrated and given up. Tom
Yeah,
just
but
crossed the name off the list and kept going.
yeah, yeah, and that's one of the ADHD tropes of being information weasels. Like we just keep going down that rabbit hole until we find rabbits or we find the end of the hole. Um, um, so yeah, I totally buy that, and I also get why Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon would bail out after, like, if they're all about disclosure, they got what they needed done,
Right.
and maybe staying connected to that particular company isn't really serving their needs anymore. So that makes
Mhm,
sense to
mhm.
me. Um,
Well, and
yeah, I buy
another
it.
thing to note also is, we talked about Tom DeLonge was saying all these crazy things. He was
Yeah,
giving
yeah,
these interviews in 2016 when he is assembling this team. He
yeah,
was still giving them in 2017 when they went public with it. None of the people who are associated with him have come out and debunked him or said, Tom's a little off his rocker, but
for
we
sure.
believe in
Yeah,
the mission of the company. Like any one of them could have very easily distanced themselves from what Tom is saying. Not one of them has done that.
yeah, yeah. I mean, there's not a lot of value in doing that. Like he clearly has demonstrated value. Don't burn that bridge until he says something really bad. Um, at least I
I mean,
wouldn't.
he said some pretty wild things. I would argue that there was damage from it, right? Like
Yeah. Okay.
Chris Mellon, Lou Elizondo, Steve Justice, these guys are now indelibly associated with Tom. Like if they go try to get a for an interview in a serious position at any other company, you better believe this is going to come up. Like, wait, you were working with the
Hmm.
UFO guy? Like, how did that happen?
It's
Like, well,
yeah.
yeah. So,
It's
like one way or
interesting because
another, they are handcuffed to this brand.
yeah, I would have expected Hal Puthoff to be a worse. worse association. Like Tom
Yeah,
DeLonge
that's
is
fair.
bored and rich. Like who? Like whatever.
Yeah.
Bored rich people are going to be bored and rich and weird. Like it's just
Hmm.
a thing.
Yeah.
But uh, but Hal Puthoff has been successfully misrepresenting himself for so many years and studying such weird shit. I don't know. In
Yeah.
my very limited research, it seems very
No,
suspicious.
I mean, I think you make an interesting point. There are also a lot of people who think that, um, because the question is why Tom, right? It's not like there have been a shortage of people petitioning the government to release information. Why did
Yeah, right.
Tom DeLonge, of all people, get access? Um,
Yeah,
there is a theory out there that the reason is because he's Tom DeLonge. Like
yeah,
the term useful idiot comes to mind, right? If he goes out there and says all these things and it blows up in our face, like, what, you're
whatever.
listening to the Blink 182 guy? Like, okay, yeah,
Yeah,
get back
right.
to us when
Yeah,
you have a serious question, right? Like,
yeah,
he's easy to distance yourself from,
yeah.
but they haven't.
You know, thinking about the Marx quote, I wonder if there was a fourth person in there. And I feel like
Hmm.
I haven't studied Marx a lot, but I wonder if there was a fourth person in there, which was the financier that you don't talk
Hmm.
about. And I wouldn't imagine Marx would talk about it either. But like,
Right.
someone's got to pay for that revolution. Um, and so I wonder if Tom actually fits in that role. Um,
Oh no, 100%. Like, To the Stars is not a company that's making Tom rich.
yeah,
Right
right.
now, they did make money, right? You know, they made the documentary for the History Channel. They're selling
Hmm.
books and stuff, but you have to assume Tom has sunk more money into this than he's taking out.
Yeah,
Like, this just cannot be a wildly profitable venture. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
All right.
There was a accounting thing that said in 2018 there were 38 million in the hole, which is not
Yeah, I
crazy,
buy that.
but for a single financier, that's pretty rough.
Hmm. Yeah.
Anyways,
All right. Well, Chuck, thank you for listening to my story.
yeah,
That's the story of how Tom DeLonge is responsible for UFO disclosure, which
that's
is
awesome.
a true statement that is absolutely freaking wild. Like,
Yeah,
no matter
totally
what you think
wild.
of Tom
I love it.
DeLonge, no matter what you think of all the rest of these guys, it is undeniable that almost all of the stuff that has happened since
Yeah,
2017, and arguably all of the stuff that is happening in Congress, is because of the Blink 182 guy.
yeah,
That has to be my favorite part of the UFO phenomena since 2017.
that's
Uh,
amazing.
that
What are we going to
said,
talk about
there
next
is
time?
a there's a close follow-up. My kind of next favorite topic is a more controversial one. Tom DeLonge, I got receipts for. I could point you at it, right? This happened. Our next topic is getting a little bit more into the weeds.
Okay,
There is a thing called the Admiral Wilson memo, and if you know ufology, you're either super excited to hear that or you're already rolling your eyes. But the Admiral Wilson memo, in a nutshell, uh, is a recounting of a meeting between a scientist named Eric Davis and Admiral Wilson, discussing secret programs dealing with crash materials and reverse engineering, and Admiral
okay,
Wilson's frustrated efforts to uncover them. Anyway,
interesting.
it is it is a
Okay,
really interesting document, and it's similar to, getting back to our theme of it's a very exciting time. It's one of those ones like, I can't tell you this is true. I can show you all the reasons why it might be true, but the main reason I'm interested in is if it is true, woohoo! It's a very exciting time.